Also, guys, I just wanted to throw this out there just for, I guess you could say, throwing meat in with the hyenas or the meat in with the lions, and just see how you feel about this, because there's an interesting concept that I have come to embrace because it's both logical and it makes sense based on the principle on which our country was founded and then our states. So the question is this, or the topic is this: jurisdiction. What is jurisdiction? Jurisdiction is the process and the means by which people are held accountable in the district and or the place that they are to rules and mandates. So, an example of jurisdiction would be your employer. Your employer got with you before you were hired, and they told you all of the rules and the expectations that they had, and then they have you sign something usually that states you're going to be an employee for them. But what's interesting is if you look at what the actual paperwork says, you are agreeing to the jurisdiction of rules and procedures and policies of the employer, so that if you violate those, you can be terminated. Makes sense to me, right? The question is does the jurisdiction of your employer reach outside of the four walls or the business parameters? Because if you work outside in construction, the business parameter. No, it doesn't. So when I worked for Sears, the policies only applied to me when I was inside the four walls. When I was in my private capacity, no, I don't have to abide by policies of Sears. I don't. Why would I? That's ridiculous. So here's an interesting concept. What is your state that you live in, that you happen to live in right now? What is your state? Is your state the actual border you see on the map? Or is, say, the state of Indiana like 3 square miles in Indianapolis? Well, Indiana as a state only exists in 3 square miles in Indianapolis, because that's where the state capital is. And what's interesting is that the jurisdiction for all of the rules and regulations for the state of Indiana only apply in the jurisdiction of the state. That would be the government seat. So here's the reason why I'm bringing this up. If you live anywhere outside of the actual state of Indiana, the actual government, do any of the rules and ordinances and little laws that they pass in the state, do they apply to you? Do they apply to you outside of the jurisdiction of the 3 square miles in Indianapolis? And if you say yes, why? The only way rules and laws and ordinances apply to you is that you contract for them to do so. And another good example of this is the United States military. Did you know that when you sign up for the military, you are signing away your right as a person to be subject to military law? Did you know that there is a difference in law between the military and, I guess you could say, state law? And that they haggle for jurisdiction all the time. So that I can't, if I were to serve in the military, I cannot claim that there is no jurisdiction, because as long as I am and you actually sign up for this, which is why a draft is unconstitutional, because you are forcing somebody into military service and you're forcing somebody into a jurisdiction that they don't want to be in. But that's a conversation for another time. So, you are traveling down the road in Nowheresville, Indiana, and actually, I'll bet you that's actually a town name, but you are in Cornfield, USA, cornfield country, and you are traveling down the road, and you see a car behind you going disco, or as I've heard it said, cherries and berries, which is actually kind of fun. But anyway, you see them behind you. Well, you pull over, and that guy comes up to you and says, papers. You need to have papers. I want your papers. And that's exactly what's going on. Stop with all of this. Well, everybody just needs to go along. Yeah. That worked right up until that they were telling people, get into this train car, we're taking you to this place so you can have a job. The Jewish people were killed en masse because they complied. It's sad. It's tragic that evil, wicked men would take advantage and just kill people en masse. It's just awful. But so the cop comes up to your window and says papers. And so you're like, okay. So you give them the papers that they want. He in turn makes a legal determination, which, by the way, they can't do. And he says, you were speeding, or you ran the stoplight, or you ran the stop sign, or you failed to yield, or whatever small infraction it is. And he writes you a ticket for it, for the infraction. Now, mind you, no crime has been committed here. There is no injured party, because under common law, there would have to be an injured party. But he decides that he's going to try to extort money from you by giving you a ticket. Okay. And he also then, he also then wants you to sign, to acknowledge, to put your seal, which is what your signature is, to put your seal on a document that is promising that you will go to court, or that you will take care of the fine. Right? And what do they tell you when you decide, well, I don't want to sign it? Well, then they threaten violence. I will arrest you. I will drag you out of your car, and I will arrest you. I will kidnap you, and then I will throw you in a cage, whether you want to or not. What was the crime? No crime committed. Matter of fact, when you ask him, well, what's the crime? He'll say, well, no. There is no crime. It's just an infraction. And just by signing this, it's just a way for you to promise the judge that you're going to appear. No, what it is coercion. And they're using threat of violence to get you before a maritime judge, which the jurisdiction is only supposed to be in the 3 square miles of the state of Indiana. And yet they are applying that as a blanket application to all of the people who live outside of the jurisdiction of the state of Indiana. So that's why when you go to court, if you don't live within the jurisdiction, actual city limits or the government limits of the state, its jurisdiction is not for you. Or you would have to contract with the state saying that you are going to submit to that jurisdiction. There's a lot of argument whether signing up for a driver's license is that you are putting yourself under jurisdiction, which then begs the question: when they force you and tell you by a gunpoint that you have to have a driver's license, you don't. That's a conversation for another time. Because I want to get into that. That is fascinating stuff. Just go ask the Amish people whether they comply with that or not. and they're able to travel freely outside of the jurisdiction. Anyway, just food for thought about jurisdiction and what the actual state is, because the government of the United States resides in Washington, D.C., and before Washington, D.C., it was in Philadelphia. But it's Washington, D.C., and it's like the 4 or 5 square miles that is Washington, D.C. That's where the jurisdiction of the government is. And the states, by coming together and joining the country, the government, the united, they comply with the federal aspect of it. Because any power that's not enumerated in the Constitution is then delegated by the states or the people. And I maintain it goes directly to the people. I mean, the states wouldn't exist if it wasn't for us. Government wouldn't exist if it wasn't for us. So, interesting conversation. This video went way longer than I really wanted it to. But jurisdiction, why does it apply to you? Now, it's interesting because the question is whether the jurisdiction, whether the state has a right to charge you with that. And I would say no, they don't. They don't have jurisdiction over you. You know, unless you sign a contract with them stating that you will. But then we as a people, we lay down. We don't fight anything. We're like, yeah, just run right over us. Yeah. We'll just take more tyranny, take more soft tyranny. Take it. Take our freedom, take our rights, take them away. We don't care. We're not going to assert them. We're not going to stand up for them. And no, sir, I am not being disorderly or disruptive by asserting my rights or cooperative. I love it when cops tell you, you're not being cooperative. No, I'm asserting my right. Asserting your right is not being uncooperative. It's actually the exact opposite. It is the cop who is being uncooperative. Anyway, jurisdiction. Why does it apply to you? The law. So I'd like to hear your comments on this. We'll talk more about that in depth too, I think, because I don't buy into the entirety of that argument, and I take it because that's more of an anarchism type of thing, type of a standpoint. Well, we can just come to a civilized society and we can all live like we all want to. Well, yeah, except mankind on his own is a wretch. So it becomes chaos. And that's the reason why communities, anyway, come up with a rule so that way everyone can have input in the rule system and everybody will then live by them because they're contracting that I will come to this community and I will live here and I will then submit myself to the rules of this community. That's proper jurisdiction. Because you're submitting, you're acknowledging that. But just saying that it applies just because you happen to be in the state is garbage. Because that would be like, well, if I'm from Indiana and I'm in Florida and some traffic cop gives me a ticket, what makes the cop think that he has any jurisdiction over me? I mean, I don't even live in his state. And just being there doesn't make me have to conform because I didn't sign anything. I signed no document, no contract with the state of Florida to abide by their rules or to make myself a servant to them or to acknowledge them or submit. That's the word I'm looking for. To submit. Now I don't buy that when you get higher up into thought and when you get into theology, because we live in Earth, we live in this planet, and God made it for us, and God made the rules, and there is no contract alive that gets us out of being accountable to God's standard. And so that's why the argument, I think, kind of falls apart at that point. But when it comes to government, oh yeah, yes, prove your jurisdiction, which is why in any court that you go to, you challenge jurisdiction, and that has to be dealt with before anything else is allowed to go on. I don't care if it's traffic court. I don't care if it's a capital court. You challenge the jurisdiction, that has to be settled before they can even move on. So anyway, I would love to spend more time about this particular subject because it's fascinating to me. Yeah. All right. So this is about another 16-minute video. I'm going to try to keep them under, around the 15-minute mark, actually, is what I really want to do. All right. This is 1789 Rebel signing off.